So currently, James might be the most interesting character that I have, not only because he's an S-class toon, but his collateral 2 damage, combined with his multi-attack rush, makes him very unique to me. Add in, he can do some bleed damage on his rush, which isn't always the safest move if you're against like payback toons, but even his basic attacks are quite strong because his overall attack is very high. His active skill isn't really doing much for me, but it is a safe way to gain AP if there's no safe targets to attack. So the point of this video is not just to go over James, because I'm sure you've watched other YouTubers who have talked about James and said what they liked about him and what you don't like about him. What I'm going to do in this video is come up with ways in order to maximize his attack, in order to make him hit harder and kill toons faster. But in order to do this, I need everyone to kind of have a basic understanding of how a toon's attack and the amount of damage that they inflict, like how that's calculated. So the basics of it is you have your base attack stat, which will be multiplied by your leader skill. So that could be, if it's 40%, then it's multiplied by 1.4. You're then multiplying that by whatever weapon you have. So in James's case right now, it's only 1.3, but I'm planning on getting it up to 1.4, which would actually be the attack base stat times 1.4 leader skill times 1.3 weapon times 1.05 weapon times 1.05 on the weapon, assuming I get a 5% increase twice. The next thing that factors in is the mod bonuses. So for a perfect mod set of attack set, that's plus 650, and then you can have a maximum mod of plus 650 attack. Now, not many people have a perfect attack mod, but it is possible, but that's kind of how you factor it in. So those 4 things are multiplied inside the brackets, and that'll give you one value. After that, you end up multiplying it by any time status buffs. So for instance, Kate gives plus 50 attack, so that would be times 1.5 for the total amount that you had before. Finally, if there's a War Tower buff, you multiply by that value as well, which is usually 1.2. This equation then goes into Scopely's attack and defense secret formula. I'm pretty sure some other players have already figured it out, but I just haven't done enough testing and haven't documented my testing in order to see what this formula could be. After this point, it then goes to another formula. So if it's a critical hit, you multiply by 1.5 plus any crit damage. So this could be a crit damage mod or a crit damage set. Next, you look at trait advantage. If there's a trait advantage, then it's times 2. And then there's also the plus minus, so if there are trait mods in place. So an attack versus a trait or a defense versus a trait. Finally, we look at if there's cutthroat. Cutthroat can add up to 1.5 times the amount of damage, and this is done at the very end of a formula. So this is the type of formula we want to keep in mind when modding our toons. And after considering this formula, I changed how I would mod James in order for him to be more effective. So the first thing I did for James's mods was add attack set mods, and this is because of the behavior of Collateral 2 damage. So the way that Collateral 2 works is that your character has to have a critical hit. When a critical hit occurs, they can spread damage up to 3 adjacent enemies, 100% damage. Now, this 100% damage is not going to be the same amount of damage applied to the initial character. Instead, this splash damage is equivalent to 100% of an attack that, in this case, my James would make against that adjacent character, not 100% of a damage dealt to my primary target. That primary target also gets the benefit of having a critical attack targeting them, which results in more damage dealt. This critical attack will not be applied to the 3 adjacent targets. It'll just be a basic attack or normal attack per se. And again, when we reference back to how damage is calculated, obviously crit damage is calculated in the latter half of the equation, And it's actually one of the reasons why I don't have crit damage mods set for James, because in my opinion, you would actually lose out on more damage being dealt, not just to the initial target, but to the 3 adjacent targets if you're trying to splash damage a lot of them and actually create a lot of damage and decrease their health quickly. Because those adjacent attacks will not get the benefit of the crit damage mods, but they will get the benefit of the increased attack set mods. The only character that will feel the full effect of a crit damage set mods will be your initial target, which could be good for killing that initial target, but my idea is to try and wipe out as many toons as I can as fast as possible. So going back again to the mod set I have for James. So obviously I have added a crit chance mod so that James has a higher chance of actually performing a critical hit. And how crit points are calculated, it's kind of like a diminishing return. So you can never achieve 100% crit chance. It's more of a curve. So you start off where, 30 crit might be equal to about 30%, but as soon as you raise it, say, to 100 crit, it's now maybe 80% chance. So I also gave James an attack versus alert mod, and I contemplated giving him an attack versus tough mod, but I see a lot more alert toons, and you would think that it might be a little dangerous to run strong toons against alert, but at the same time, James being an S-class toon, he has way higher stats than all other toons in the game other than other S-class toons. So in my opinion, he is basically on par with all of these other toons out there, if not ahead of them. Now, I will say my last 2 mods on James are a little different. I was kind of caught up and torn between stun resist as well as attack up when impaired or even AP drain. But right now, I'm running James with Camilla, so she actually has an active stun recovery skill. So he's kind of protected in some ways from being stunned at least for too long. And I'm not super worried about him becoming confused. There are very few toons, especially on defense, that use confuse compared to, stun and impair. So I would just need to make sure I have a toon that can focus my team in order to fight through the confuse effect. And finally, the attack up when taunted mod. So there's really 2 trains of thought on this, because based on how the damage formula is calculated, technically if James has a critical attack and collateral damage 2 occurs, so if he's taunted, he will get 90% more attack in that initial attack part of the formula because it's a limited time status effect. And what's unique about this, so attack up when taunted and attack up when impaired, this mod will play into effect to the 3 adjacent toons that James ends up targeting. And this means he's actually applying a lot more damage this way. And with the number of taunting toons out there, I think he could be super effective, especially having this bonus. By adding the impair resist mod, it's basically nullifying part of Dr. Stevens' effect, where even if my James is taunted into Dr. Stevens, he might not become impaired, so that means I could end up rushing him, especially if I am focused. And I've already done a video on how to maximize attack up when taunted by focusing your toons, because you can get crazy high amounts of damage, and because James is a collateral 2 toon, when taunted he will apply an exorbitant amount of damage. Now, again, I was considering attack up when impaired, but that would also mean that James is impaired and would not be able to rush. And because his rush is composed of 2 basic attacks, it means that each of his 2 basic attacks at 250% damage, I think, would then be under the influence of attack up when taunted if he was a taunted character. And that to me just screams a huge amount of damage that could be applied to the enemy. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't any other mod sets that you could do, but this is the one that I am choosing to go with because I think I can optimize it the most. If you're not too worried about impair, you could go with stun resist as well. Again, this is the team that I'm going to try and use a bit, just to see if I can figure out how high his damage can go, and just kind of testing out his abilities. Another thought that I had was about not attacking the toon that James has an advantage against. So he has a natural advantage against fast toons because even a basic attack by James against a fast toon would apply quite a bit of damage. But because I'm betting on James having a critical hit, it means that the initial target that I'm attacking will get 1.5 times more damage applied to them. So in some cases, it almost seems wise to not directly attack the fast toon that's available because I might actually be able to kill them with the splash damage and be able to save my critical hit that would apply 1.5 times as much damage. So what I'm testing right now, kind of in this video, is how high James's attack can get, and if there's any advantage to attacking, say, Douglas or Sandy instead of Rick. Like, obviously, by attacking Sandy, I have the opportunity to splash up to 3 toons, but if I attack a toon in one of the corners, then there's only 2 other adjacent toons that are available for James's splash. And I know that this team is a little redundant in some ways, because although Kate does plus 50 attack, so does Glenn. But the thing that I need Kate for is her focus. I know that Camilla can also focus on her rush, but it's only for 1 turn. And Kate does 2 turns, which makes her a lot more viable to use when I'm trying to test out how much damage James can actually deal. A toon I could sub in for Glenn is Sean, who can do a large amount of damage as well. And being a waste not toon, any carryover damage, so extra damage done to the initial target, will carry over as very useful, because if you combine it with a defense down, for instance, you can end up killing targets that have insanely high defense, because waste not, the carryover damage, kind of just ignores all defense stats. And so in my opinion, it's a great ability and just gives you a lot to work with. So for those of you who ended up picking James, I hope this video helped give you an idea of how you could go about modding him and the type of team build that you might want to use. Feel free to share the type of mods that you are using on James, as well as how you're going to upgrade his weapon, and what other toons you plan on running with him, or what teams you want to use him against. I would love to hear some different ideas in order to kind of gauge how people are going to be utilizing him, for those who got him, of course. I know a number of people ended up getting Krista, who is a great toon as well. Thank you for watching and listening to my video.